Guide, how do bridges even stay up? Like, they're just these big things crossing rivers or highways, and they hold cars and trucks all day. What keeps them from falling down?
That's a great question to start with. Bridges do seem pretty amazing when you think about it. Let's break it down by talking about the forces acting on them, like invisible pushes and pulls that everything in the world deals with. First off, imagine you're standing on the ground. What keeps you from sinking right through the floor?
The ground pushes back up on me, I guess. Like, if I jump, it bounces me up a bit.
Exactly. That's a force called the normal force, but for bridges, the big one pulling everything down is gravity. Gravity is that tug from Earth that makes apples fall from trees, and you slide down a playground slide. On a bridge, it pulls on the weight of the whole structure itself, plus any cars or people crossing it. A heavy truck rumbling over might weigh as much as an elephant, say 20 tons, and that weight presses down on the bridge's deck, the flat part you drive on. It compresses the materials, squishing them a little, like how if you stack too many books on a table, the wood might creak under the pressure.
Whoa! So the bridge has to hold all that squish without breaking? But what if there's no truck? Does gravity still try to pull the bridge into the water?
Oh, absolutely. Even empty, the bridge's own weight, steel beams, concrete slabs, gets yanked downward by gravity. Engineers call this the dead load, like a sleeping giant that's always there. And then there's the live load, which is stuff that moves, like traffic or crowds at a parade. All that combines to create compression in the bridge's parts, pushing them together. But bridges aren't just sitting there taking it. They push back, thanks to how they're built. Think of it like a game of tug-of-war, but with gravity always pulling one way.
Tug of war. Okay, that makes sense. But aren't there other things besides just down pulling? Like, what about when it's stormy?
Smart thinking. You're already spotting more forces. Wind is a sneaky one. It doesn't just blow leaves around, it pushes sideways on bridges. Imagine a tall bridge swaying a bit in a breeze, like a flagpole in the wind. For a long suspension bridge, wind can create a force called lift or drag, pushing up or sideways, sometimes even making the whole thing twist. Remember that time you tried to balance on a wobbly seesaw during a gusty day at the park? The wind made it harder because it added an extra shove. On bridges, strong winds can hit with the force of a giant hand, testing the sides and cables. And don't forget earthquakes or temperature changes. Heat makes metal expand. Cold makes it shrink, which pulls or pushes parts in different directions.
Expand and shrink? Like how a balloon gets bigger when you blow it up? So all these forces are hitting the bridge from everywhere. Down, side, twist. No wonder they seem flimsy sometimes. Like those old wooden ones in movies that look ready to snap.
Yeah, those movie bridges do look rickety, don't they? But here's the key. Bridges seem flimsy because we see the skinny cables or beams, but they're designed to handle those forces without buckling. Take compression again, that downward squash from weight. If a beam is too thin, it might bend or crack under the pressure, like stepping on a dry twig. But strong materials like steel or concrete resist that compression, distributing the force so no single spot gets overwhelmed. Wind's sideways push? That creates tension, pulling parts apart, like stretching a rubber band. If it's too much, things could tear, but good designs spread it out. And for the objection that bridges look too weak for heavy stuff, think about the trucks you mentioned. A single semi-truck might exert thousands of pounds per square inch. But engineers calculate every bit so the bridge compresses just a tiny bit, staying safe.
Thousands of pounds? That's crazy. So, like, they plan for the worst? But I still don't get how the actual shape of the bridge fights back against all this pulling and pushing.
You're right to wonder about that. Shapes are where the real magic happens. Different designs turn those forces into strengths, like how a straw bends but doesn't break if it's the right shape. What do you think a curved arch might do differently than a straight, flat one?
A curved arch? Maybe it pushes the weight outward instead of just squishing straight down. Like, if I make a bridge with my hands like an upside-down U, it feels stronger than if I just hold them flat.
Spot on. That's exactly how arches work. And it's a clever way to fight gravity without everything collapsing inward. Let's dive into why different shapes aren't just pretty. They're like secret weapons against those forces we talked about. You mentioned straight beams, and yeah, some bridges are basically long, flat ones, like a simple wooden plank over a stream in your backyard. But for bigger spans, a straight beam sags under heavy loads because gravity pulls the middle down, creating too much bendy stress in the middle. It's like trying to balance a diving board with a bunch of kids jumping on it. Eventually, it dips and cracks if it's not thick enough. The objection that all bridges could just be beefed up straight beams makes sense at first. Why complicate things? But straight ones need massive supports or they'd be too heavy themselves, wasting materials and money. Instead, smart designs redirect the forces, so the bridge helps itself stay up.
So, like, the shape changes how the push and pull happen? Tell me more about that arch thing.
Absolutely. An arch bridge is curved, like a gentle rainbow, often made of stone or concrete wedged together. When weight from cars presses down on top, say a bus full of kids on a field trip, the arch turns that compression into a push outward toward the ends. Imagine squeezing a stress ball. The force doesn't just stay in one spot, but spreads along the curve, thrusting against the sturdy piers on either side. Those piers then shove back into the ground, creating a stable loop. It's brilliant, because arches have been around since ancient Romans built them over 2,000 years ago to cross valleys without fancy tools. No tension pulling things apart here. It's all about that compressive hug holding everything in place. Without the curve, a flat version would buckle like a stack of cards in the wind.
Romans? Cool. So arches are old school strong. But what if the bridge is really long, like over a huge river? An arch might not reach that far.
Good point. Arches shine for medium spans, but for super long ones, engineers switch to suspension bridges with cables. These are the ones with those towering towers and dangling wires, like the Golden Gate we might talk about later. Cables are masters of tension. They're pulled tight like guitar strings, hanging the deck from above. Gravity tugs the road down, but the cables yank back up, distributing the load to the anchors at each end. Think of it like a hammock. Your weight sags it, but the ropes stretch and hold you without snapping, because they're flexible in tension. Steel cables can handle thousands of tons, twisting just enough to absorb wind's side pushes without letting the whole thing swing wildly. And unlike a straight beam that might snap under its own weight over a mile-long gap, cables let the bridge breathe with the forces.
Hammock. Yeah, I've fallen asleep in one before. It sways but doesn't dump me out, so cables are for pulling, arches for squishing. Are there other shapes?
There sure are. Truss bridges use a web of triangles, like the skeleton of a kite, made of skinny metal bars. Triangles are the strongest shape because they don't deform easily. Any force trying to push or pull just gets spread across the whole network. Picture a swing set frame. If you hang from one bar, it might bend, but the crisscross braces share the load, so nothing gives way. Trusses are great for medium bridges over highways, turning heavy truck weights into even pressure on all members. Some compress, some stretch in tension, but together they even out the gravity pull, making the bridge lighter and cheaper than a solid block. Remember that objection about straight beams being simple? Trusses prove why not. They fight forces more efficiently, like a team passing a hot potato, instead of one kid holding it all.
Triangles everywhere. That's why my popsicle stick bridges in school always used them. They held more weight than the flat ones. But how do they decide which shape for which bridge? Does it depend on the river or something?
Your popsicle bridges were a mini engineering lab. Yeah, the choice depends on the span length, the ground type, and even the weather in that spot. A short, rocky canyon might get an arch to hug the sides, while a wide, windy bay needs cables to flex. Trusses fit where you want quick builds over traffic. Each design turns gravity's downward yank, plus wind's shoves, into balanced pushes and pulls that the materials can handle without drama. It's like picking the right tool for a job, a hammer for nails, not a screwdriver. These shapes don't just resist, they work with the forces, making bridges stand tall for decades.
Balanced. I get it now. No single part takes all the beating. But after picking the shape, how do they know it really won't fail when a huge storm hits or something?
That's the million-dollar question. Engineers don't just hope for the best. They test everything rigorously to catch any weak spots before a single bolt gets turned. Imagine if they built without checking. A storm could turn a bridge into a twisted pretzel. But they use a combo of hands-on models and super smart math to simulate those huge storms, earthquakes, or monster trucks, proving the design holds up. It's like practicing a bike trick on grass before hitting the street. Way safer.
Okay, testing with models? Like the ones we make in science class, but bigger?
Exactly, but way more high-tech. They start with scale models, tiny versions of the full bridge, maybe 1/100th the size, built from the same materials or close matches like balsa wood for wood bridges or plastic for concrete ones. In a lab, engineers hook these up to machines that drop weights on them, simulating cars or the bridge's own heft, or blast them with fans and water hoses to mimic wind and rain. For a storm, they might shake the model on a vibrating table to fake an earthquake, watching how the arches compress or cables stretch without snapping. One time, testers for a new bridge design loaded a model with sandbags until it groaned, then cranked up a wind tunnel to 100 miles per hour. The model wobbled, but stayed put, showing the real thing could handle a hurricane's fury. These tests reveal surprises, like if a joint heats up and expands too much, causing a twist nobody saw coming.
Wind tunnels? That's awesome! Like testing a paper airplane but for giant bridges. So if the model breaks, they fix the design before building for real?
Spot on. They tweak and retest until it's bulletproof. But models aren't perfect. They can't catch every real-world quirk, like uneven ground settling over years. That's where math and computers jump in. Engineers crunch numbers using physics equations to calculate stresses, how much a beam compresses under 50 tons, or how wind twists cables. Today, software like finite element analysis divides the bridge into thousands of tiny pieces on a computer, running simulations of every force we talked about. Gravity's pull, wind's shove, even temperature swings. It's like a video game where they play disasters, seeing red zones for high stress and adjusting shapes or adding braces. For instance, they might discover that in a gale, the deck lifts 2 inches too much, so they beef up the cables by 20%. These calcs predict failures years ahead, way beyond what a small model can show.
Computers predicting disasters. Kinda scary, but cool. But what if the math misses something huge? Like a freak storm nobody's seen before. Models and numbers can't guess everything, right?
You're hitting on a real objection there. Real life does throw curveballs. Like the 1930s Tacoma Narrows Bridge that twisted apart in wind because early tests underestimated aeroelastic flutter, a wobbling effect. But modern engineers build in safety margins to cover those unknowns. They design for loads 1.5 to 2 times heavier than expected, like planning for 2 elephants per truck instead of 1. So even if math misses a surprise, there's wiggle room. Regulations from groups like the American Society of Civil Engineers demand this. No bridge gets approved without proving it can take 150% of the worst predicted storm without collapsing, or even 300% before total failure. It's not just theory. They factor in history, like past floods, and run what-if scenarios on computers for black swan events. Plus, after building, sensors monitor the real bridge for years, feeding data back to refine future tests. That way, no single oversight dooms it.
Safety margins. Like extra padding on a helmet. So they overbuild on purpose? That must make bridges super strong, even for stuff we can't predict.
Yep, it's all about that buffer turning good enough into rock solid. Take your popsicle bridge idea. If you added extra sticks just in case, it held more pennies, right? Same here. Math shows the minimum needed, models confirm it, and margins ensure longevity. Without them, a minor miscalculation could spell trouble. But with, bridges shrug off surprises. Engineers even test materials themselves, stretching steel samples until they break to know exact limits, ensuring every part's rated for the job.
I see. So testing isn't just one thing. It's models shaking, computers crunching, and extra strength baked in. No wonder they last. But, do any actual bridges out there prove all this testing pays off?
Oh, definitely. Plenty of icons have been battered by time and tempests, yet keep chugging along, showing how these methods turn ideas into enduring marvels.
Battered by time and tempests? Like, which ones? Tell me about a really famous bridge that's been around forever but still looks tough.
Let's start with one that's a total icon. The Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Opened in 1937, it's over 85 years old now, stretching more than a mile across a choppy bay with fierce winds whipping through almost daily. People thought it'd be a sitting duck for gales. After all, that old Tacoma disaster we touched on showed how wind could make bridges dance to death. But the Golden Gate's designers wised up, using those massive suspension cables we talked about, each as thick as a person's torso and strong enough to hold up 27,000 tons. When winds gust up to 100 miles per hour, the cables flex in tension, absorbing the sideways shoves like a bungee cord on a trampoline. The whole deck can sway up to 27 feet side to side without a hitch, thanks to the testing that predicted those forces. Even earthquakes, San Francisco's got plenty, haven't toppled it. Built-in joints let it roll with the punches. Today, it carries 100,000 cars a day, and despite the years of salt air rusting the orange paint, it's as sturdy as ever.
Sway 27 feet! That's like the length of a school bus! And it's not new, but still holds all those cars! So the cables really do fight the wind like you said.
They sure do. And it's a perfect example of how testing pays off against the idea that old bridges just wear out and weaken. Those cables aren't static. They're inspected every couple of years by teams, rappelling down like superheroes, checking for frayed strands or corrosion from fog. If a section's iffy, they swap it out. No big deal, because of the safety margins built in from the start. Over decades, that's kept it from crumbling under constant use, proving that with good design and upkeep, age isn't a weakness, but a badge of smart engineering.
Inspections like checking a bike before a ride? Cool. What's another one that's super old?
How about the Brooklyn Bridge in New York? Finished in 1883, that's almost 150 years ago, it was the longest suspension bridge when it opened, crossing the East River with massive stone towers. Back then, folks worried it'd sag under horse-drawn carriages and early cars, especially since the river's currents pull hard below. But its design mixes cables with a Gothic arch vibe on the towers, distributing weight like a pro. The main cables, woven from over 14,000 steel wires, handle the compression from the roadway above by pulling everything into balance, gravity's downforce gets redirected through the arches to the solid bedrock anchors. During its first big test, workers loaded it with 18 tons of weights to simulate crowds, and it barely budged, just like the models predicted. Hurricanes, fires, even a 1900 subway crash into a support haven't fazed it much. Today, it sees walkers, bikers, and 4,000 vehicles hourly, and the arches still shove that load outward without cracking, showing how shapes turn years of pounding into no biggie.
150 years? That's older than my great-grandma's house stories. And it mixes cables and arches? So no single part gets all the stress from the weight.
Exactly. It's a hybrid that spreads the forces evenly, just like those truss webs we mentioned. The objection that time weakens everything? Not here. The Brooklyn's cables have been recoded multiple times to fight rust, and sensors now track every vibration from traffic or tides. Engineers dive into the water to inspect underwater piers, ensuring no sneaky erosion from the river undermines the base. That ongoing care, combined with the original overbuilt margins, like cables rated for double the expected load, means it's not just surviving, it's thriving. In 2019, they even retrofitted it with new lighting without closing it down, proving adaptability keeps old bridges kicking.
Retrofitted? Like giving it a tune-up? I guess that's why they don't fall apart after so long. Constant checks and fixes.
Tune-up is spot on. Bridges get more TLC than your family car. Take the London Bridge. Wait, not the nursery rhyme one, but the real Tower Bridge from 1894, with its famous bascules that lift for ships. It's endured World War II bombs and Thames floods, yet the hydraulic arms and steel framework distribute wind and weight through tension and compression like clockwork. Inspections every 5 years, plus modern tech like strain gauges, catch wear before it worsens. Or the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, Italy, an arched stone bridge from 1345, over 600 years old. It survived floods and wars because those Roman-style arches channel loads to the riverbanks, and yearly checks by masons keep the stones wedged tight. These aren't flukes. They're proof that testing, smart shapes, and vigilant maintenance turn potential weaknesses into strengths. Even after decades of sun, rain, and rush hour chaos, they stand as testaments to engineering that anticipates the long haul.
Wow, 600 years. That's like from knights to smartphones. All these bridges show the forces and tests really work, huh? No more wondering if they'll snap in a storm.
You nailed it. They do. And it's inspiring how human smarts keep them soaring. Bridges like these remind us that with the right pushback against gravity and wind, anything's possible.